Look, there's nothing like a tornado outbreak spanning multiple states to remind us that storm season in America is upon us. Disaster has hit multiple red states, including my own. Laurel County, Kentucky, unfortunately lost 19 people in a deadly tornado that ripped through there this past week. St. Louis, 5 people died there. You can you can't prevent these storms, Denver, from happening. We know that. Um, but there are things that the federal government can do to help mitigate some of the damage and lives lost. And I'm thinking of two particular agencies right now that Trump and Musk and Doge and Republicans, frankly, want to cut. One is NOAA, which is the National Oceanic Atmospheric Agency, and the other is FEMA. Now, NOAA gives us the early warning, right? And FEMA is the agency that helps people and communities recover from these disasters. And I want to start with these cuts to both of these agencies because Doge has gone after NOAA, and Trump and the big beautiful budget bill that they want to pass, that just passed in the House and is going to the Senate now, has really big cuts to FEMA as well. So let's start there.
Well, so it's interesting. The thing that I've been fighting for so long, when I was in Congress and things like that, was actually having fact-based policy discussions, right, Amy? And we're going to need a drink for this one as I go into this. Mm. As we're looking right now, we're looking at cutting programs that have been proven to be effective. When you're looking at FEMA, when you're looking at programs that help individuals and help groups and organizations to recover from the best thing we say is acts of God, right? That's what we put that in quotes, right? These massive, horrific things that happen to people based on weather patterns and things of that nature. However, what's interesting is that you're still seeing this weird activity that all this stuff is happening because the government is actually creating it. It's the conspiracy theory side of it. And that's called HARP, right? That's the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. So there's a lot of conspiracy theorists who actually believe that the bad weather we're seeing is a function of government intervention. So it's interesting to me that we have legislation out there that's cutting FEMA, or you have Doge, people saying that we don't need it or it should go back to the states, right, Amy? Which was what Trump said, right? That the states should be taking care of this. When you have so much transaction of economics across all 50 states, I don't think people realize that one state falling, if the state is actually creating or um, trying to prop up what's happening in real time with monies to save themselves from these natural disasters, how that ripple effects happens across all 50 states and even in international finance and international economics. So we have this weird juxtaposition, right, Amy, where you have people going against things that work, but they're on websites or talking about things that are insane, like this conspiracy theory about HARP, and that HARP is actually creating these awful things in red states to destroy red states because it's the globalists or the evil, people above it. And so, Amy, as we're having these discussions, as we do Truth in the Barrel over and over again, when I was reading the incredible research and our background in doing this and our research team who did an incredible job, I started thinking is what happens, Amy, right? When we can't even make solid decisions on things like FEMA, and we have things being said about FEMA that are patently false, yet we have people who are actually enacting these policies believe in things like the HARP conspiracy theories that the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program is creating the bad weather in the first place. So here's what I think is going to happen, Amy, and I'd love to have your opinion on this. I think you're going to have more and more people want to do investigations into HAARP, into HARP, and investigations into FEMA and how they're working together to destroy the American people. And those are the things that I'm starting to see again in these conspiracy chat rooms. And Amy, that's why I think this show is important. I've said it over and over again. But again, this whole FEMA thing and what's happening to me just still reeks of this fantasy-based policy that's coming out from conspiracy theorists that run our government.
Yeah, there's a lot there. The conspiracy theorist thing is really important, and I want to come back to that. The government right now is being run by these types of people, as you just said, and it's going to have real implications on Americans. So right now, the truth is that FEMA is in the process of cutting 2,000 jobs,
Yeah.
2,000 FEMA workers. These are not just people that
Stupid.
sit around Denver. These are people that clear debris, that rebuild homes, that understand how to dole out resources effectively and equitably when a disaster strikes. They are experts in this area. And so cutting 2,000 workers, that's 30%. 30% of FEMA. That's what the Trump administration wants to do and is in the process of doing. Um, as you mentioned, there's a lot of people out there, and it may be also Americans, not just Republicans, um, but just Americans in general, that some people may think there's billions of dollars wasted in FEMA. And you also hear from people, they want FEMA to be more responsive. And to me, it's kind of like the the opposite. You think that there's billions of dollars wasted, and yet you want FEMA to be more responsive, and yet you're backing a guy that's cutting FEMA altogether. It just doesn't make any sense. Look, this is what government does. And when people say to me, uh, we should have FEMA go to the states, right? Because that's what Donald Trump has proposed. He thinks the FEMA should just go away and the states should pick up. What's the problem with that? I'll tell you
Well,
a couple things that come to mind for me. One, storms don't know any borders, so they ravage through multiple states, and also states don't necessarily have the resources that the technical resources to do this. This should be done at the federal level because it is more efficient to be done at the federal level, right?
yeah, it absolutely is. Also, there's the ability to marshal resources across state boundaries if it's a federal level. But here's the other thing too. You just sort of nailed it. And I'm not saying you took my thunder, Amy. You didn't. But here's the thing. When you're looking at red states, when you're looking at red states that are actually in the red, how are they going to afford this kind of, I don't know, outlay financially when you see things that happen that awful? Like, Kentucky, right? I was just remembering, and I hate when I remember something after I've read so much, but I just remembered, Kentucky has had issues, right? And when you're looking at, I think if I remember correctly, it was Kentucky or one of the other states, because of the cuts from Doge, they were having a tough time doing 24-hour coverage for tornado warnings, right? And
Right.
I'm just like, we're the United States of America, and we can't staff an early warning system for natural disasters. What is happening, right? And what's happening is stupidity.
And again, the conspiracy theory stuff didn't just happen. If you remember last during the Trump campaign, when the hurricane hit and devastated parts of Western North Carolina, Donald Trump went out on the campaign trail, and JD Vance and all these guys. And what did they say? They said that Biden and Harris were stealing money
Mm,
from FEMA
mm,
and giving it to undocumented immigrants. And that's why you haven't had
yeah,
this recovery effort in a timely fashion. They said, and let me just say to everyone, that is completely false.
it's made up.
It is a conspiracy theory that is not true. And so people already don't believe in this institution of FEMA. But how does it work? And this is something I had to look up just for this conversation here because I didn't really know. When a disaster strikes, the governor of a state has to request to the president for a disaster declaration. The
Hmm.
president then acknowledges and says, okay, there's a disaster in that state. And that is what triggers the federal response, the FEMA going into that state and providing public assistance. So, clearing up debris, as I mentioned before, but also private assistance to homeowners and your personal assistance. You can get temporary housing, for example. And so there's things that we want government to do. I mean, if there's one thing that government should be doing, in my mind, this is on the top. Other than protecting our country from foreign invasion, this is another big one in my mind. The other thing I hear sometimes is What about, why is the government helping these individual people out? If there's a disaster that strikes, then we should just crowd fund. These people should go out on the internet and try to get money for their own repair jobs. That's what we should do. It shouldn't be a government function. Let respond to that, Denver. What are the issues with that one?
I don't even have. Okay, every single person in a natural disaster zone, say it's one of the big hurricanes, and you have tens of thousands of houses. Okay, let's look at the LA wildfires, right? So, are we going to have tens of thousands of people trying to crowdfund their own relief? It's so ludicrous. It's so absolutely mind-boggling. You were talking about the conspiracy theories about money being stolen and sent to immigrants. We already talked about the HARP conspiracy theories. How about the FEMA concentration camps? Now you're talking about the same people who believe in this nonsense are saying we should crowdfund, right? Crowdfund relief. Are you kidding me?
Well, it would be ripe for a lot of fraud.
Fraud would be everywhere because
everywhere.
You can't. Okay. So you have 47,000 people, right, that are affected. And every single person, if they're like, hey, we're setting up a new crowdfunding space to help, hey, I'm Bob Smith. I live at, this street. By the way, I could find out where everybody lives, as you know, in my background in my company, Amy. Amy, if it was you, I would pretend to be you. I would make so much money. It's just, it's mind boggling the stupidity that you'd have to have in your brain to think that that would work or that's something that even makes sense in any way. So I don't even really have the words. It's just
we need FEMA. We need FEMA in this country, and what is happening right now is really bad. The Trump administration fired the acting FEMA director right a day after he testified in front of Congress. And when he was asked by Congress, hey, do you think that FEMA should be dismantled and sent to the states? He said, no, that's not a good idea for all the reasons you and I just talked about. And guess what? Trump fired him, replaced him with a guy by the name of David Richardson, who has no experience in disaster relief. Imagine that. He's a former Marine, who wrote a book. And apparently in his book, he has a pretty big streak of not liking women in the military. So there's a theme also within the Trump administration. But he had this all hands event when he took over FEMA, got everybody together who was left, I guess, and said, hey, don't get in front of me. I'm gonna do what Trump wants, and I will run right over you. Don't get in my way. On his first day in office. How awesome is that?
Amy, it's like the JV football coach finally becomes the varsity coach his first day, and he's screaming and yelling and trying to assert his authority, and he couldn't believe that he's actually been promoted. But the reason he went from JV to varsity football coach, because it's a school with 14 people and he was the only one left in the town. That's sort of, that's what we have with people like this. They're so weak. They're so flawed as human beings that they don't even understand what leadership means, but they don't even understand how to interact with people. And if it is a person that's already shown this, that stain of misogyny, you already know who you're dealing with, right? You're dealing with, one of those self-described alphas, right? Who thinks they're incredible, and that, they need to take more creatine, during their workouts, and for their 135 bench press, right? This is the kind of people we're dealing with. But again, the fact that's great research on the book there, Amy, that if he's a misogynist already, you know who you're dealing with as a human being and a leader.
Well, here's the thing. The bigger picture is climate disasters and hurricanes and wildfires and tornadoes, they ain't going away. They appear to be getting worse. Anybody that has half a brain can see that. And
climate change isn't real, Amy.
Well,
what are you talking about?
I'm telling you, Denver, we're going to have to do another segment on that someday.
Climate change it's been dictated by the government. That's a deep state globalist ploy to take over the United States. And by the way, you can control weather within the borders, Amy, because we can seed those clouds using HARP. We have special weapon systems and seeds, and we can drop them right in there. So
I got you.
This is ridiculous, Amy.
The facts are, Denver, the 3 top recipients in terms of states of FEMA aid are Louisiana, Florida, and Texas. Red states.
Yeah, I think
We are
that's what
actively
yeah.
right now trying to make government fail. And that is what is going on within the Trump administration at the moment. And people need to know all about that.